But when we're effed, it becomes the glasses that we see the world through. Everything that we see is another example of how, see, I won't get another job, or I don't have something to offer. So people who experience imposter syndrome tend to externalize success, and we tend to internalize failure. So when we get it wrong, when something happens, it's like, oh, I'm a failure.
The Leading Like a Lady podcast was created to remind Black women, young and old, that acting like a lady is exactly what the world needs in leadership. Don't forget to subscribe to the blog so that you receive updates on when we post directly to your email. Ladies, and any gents that might be listening, how are you doing? This is going to be a 2-part episode series on how to deal with layoffs, incarceration, and loneliness during the holiday season. We had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Alexandra Walker, who's going to introduce herself shortly in the episode. And I think you will be just as impressed with her background, if I know you well, my audience, as I was. I am extremely honored to have been able to speak to someone who is doing the type of work that she's doing, especially in New York with Rikers Island, which we'll hear about soon. But I thought that this would be an important conversation as well for the 500,000 Black women in the United States right now who are going into the holiday season still dealing with the fact that they've been laid off and don't know probably where their next paycheck is coming from. So not just advice on how to find a therapist or how to use therapy to get you through this holiday season, but also just some validation for your feelings that you might have during this time of the year, and also some tools to equip you with how to have conversations about what you are feeling with the loved ones who are in your life, or maybe just how to navigate the space if you are feeling alone or you don't have that kind of familial family or any kind of other support from people. Without any further ado, here's the first part, again, like I said, to this 2-part series. If you enjoy the conversation and you feel like you want to hear more, it's very important that you please leave a comment below for the content that's coming up over the remainder of this year, 2025, and also figuring out how to bring content that is most valuable to you in the new year. How are you?
I am great, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today. Not to be perpetually victimized, right? But I think that especially women of color, Black women, they find it very difficult to admit that they're feeling insecure about things because we are painted as this like strong group of people. Number one, we are painted with this stereotype sometimes of, well, you can take it because we've been putting on those airs as a survival technique. But then like the catch-22 is that if we do that, it puts us in a position where any little mistake is tantamount to like our careers being like of, falling apart. So I want to give us room and space to feel insecure and not feel like we're vulnerable or at risk of, having the other shoe fall or like everything come crashing down. Here are some realistic steps towards getting over that insecurity.
It sounds like a real mix of imposter syndrome and perfectionism kind of swirling in one. And that's really hard for women, and specifically, I would say. But that's really challenging and to find a space where you can talk about it, or at least hear about it and know that you're not alone. I think that's been a big part of my journey is, the more you share, the more you realize that people feel very similarly for different ways sometimes, but these insecurities are real.
Yeah. And in a space where, AI, automation, all these things are becoming like more and more like existential threats, vulnerability or like honesty and authenticity is like the one thing that's going to keep us like, competitive. It's actually a competitive advantage.
Agreed.
So
the one thing computers can't do.
Which I don't know, maybe the tech overlords think it's a great thing. No more emotion. Let's eradicate emotion from the world. I don't know what their game plan is, but I think that when it comes to like an audience and it comes to like community, that's still important. So well, I think like it's important to like first just introduce yourself and tell us, who you are, how did you get into this line of work, and if you can, like, just tell us like how your work seems to be shifting lately, like maybe over the past 5 years, and it has been prior to 2020. So, what was life pre 2020 in
Oof,
your role, and then how has it changed since?
absolutely. So, my name is Alex Walker. I am director and co-founder of the Alliance for Community and Justice Innovation, which is a company that I started with some colleagues of mine to try to help agencies that are doing really important work, like criminal justice reform, to
Amazing.
do what they say they want to do. I'll get into that in a minute, but I am a
Yeah.
mom. I have two kiddos and two dogs, and that's been a big part of my life lately. My career has been at the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health. And so I started out as a clinician and wanted to work with kids as a therapist, and I did a lot of work to pursue that. And then quickly realized that I would never last being a therapist for kiddos throughout a long career. So I switched to
Mm,
working with adults in the reentry space. So people either before they went to prison or coming out of prison. And that has been where I have stayed for many, many years. Well, my whole career, 27 years. I've had some really interesting roles. I was a clinician for individuals who are incarcerated at Rikers Island and was involved in assessing them to see if they could withstand solitary confinement, punitive segregation. I've
mm,
overseen as part of a regulatory agency, multiple halfway houses across the state and been involved in trying to get them to do evidence-based practices. So do what works in practice. And my most recent government
yeah.
job was on the Colorado Board of Parole. So making lots of decisions about whether or not people can leave prison early. Through all of that, what I've seen is a lot of really great ideas, a lot of really good science never make it into practice, whether it was, um, bottom up or top down change. Organizations kind of ate that change up and it would fizzle, fade, or just implode. And in 2011, I learned about this whole body of science that lives outside of criminal justice, which is called implementation science. It's the study of how you put things into practice instead of any what that you're doing. It doesn't matter what the what is really. And it changed my whole career and life. And was like, oh my gosh, we've been doing this wrong for a really long time. There are very clear ways that you can put things into practice so that they sustain and they get you outcomes. And we're not doing that in the criminal justice system. And so ACJI,
Mm,
like the company I co-founded, is all about that, working on things like organizational culture and alignment of practices to help support organizations in doing what they say they want to do, but that's really hard to do in
mm.
practice.
I am blown away. And I really want to applaud you. If no one has given you your flowers for that amazing
Mm.
work. I mean, especially when it comes to the criminal justice system, when it comes to Rikers. I'm from New York, so I
Uh-huh.
know all about that.
It's a really, and there are many difficult professions. So when you ask me what have the last 5 or so years been like, I think what happened 5 years ago is I realized how burnt out I was and how I'd been struggling in and out of burnout for many, many years. And so a big part of the work of the last 5 years for me has been trying to figure out how do we help human serving professionals, so educators, doctors, medical folks, criminal justice people, social workers, stay connected to the work for the long haul. How do you do a 30-year career in a really difficult space? And that's been a labor of love for me for 20 plus years or so. But I think in the last 5, I've really gotten clearer about how we do a lot of self-care for our bodies. We exercise and all those things are very good. But I needed something more to work on self-care for my mindset. And I needed it to be more than just meditating because I've struggled with meditating and it wasn't doing it for me. And so over
Yeah.
the last 5 years, I've been piecing together science around something I call resilient optimism, which is a mindset practice to help people stay passionate and engaged in their work when they're in these really tough fields. Because when we
Yeah.
don't, it not only impacts the outcomes, we can't get good outcomes with our clients when we're not well, but it also impacts our families. And we see so many statistics of people burning out, taking their own lives, suffering tremendously with addiction and violence and all sorts of things. And a big part of that is not taking care of our mindsets in these roles. And so I think that has been kind of where my lens has shifted over the last 5 years is I want to do this work forever. I feel really strongly about it. And that means I have to take care of my mind and the lens that I use to see the world. Otherwise, I can't bring good outcomes to the space. And so I've been speaking this message for a number of years now, and I think it's really important for all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's funny because at first we were all doing the girl boss thing and we were burnt out from that.
Hmm.
We were all like, doing it big, like climbing the ladders, et cetera, et cetera. Now a lot of us have been knocked off the ladder
Yeah.
as a result of, I don't know, I'm laughing out of, to hide the pain instead of, and then that's
It's a
all of the
good coping
pain.
skill.
But I mean, at least since March of 2025 this year, the Department of Labor has been sharing a lot of data about layoffs and particularly the groups that have been most affected by it. And
Yeah.
in my reporting, I mean, had the whole figure of the 300,000 plus Black women who have lost jobs since
Hmm.
March, or since April, I think. But it actually goes as far back as 2020. Again, it's been 500,000 Black women at minimum who have been out of the workforce, and have not returned since 2020. So we're coming on 6 years now, where
Yeah.
500,000 people have not known where their next paycheck is coming from.
Right.
How do you reconcile with that as like a human being, and then as a clinician? What do you think is a realistic way to manage that kind of trauma? I guess it is.
Absolutely. It's trauma. And I think it really speaks to some of the work that you've been talking about around scarcity mindset and limiting beliefs, that when these kinds of things, these traumas happen, it just sets those things ablaze in our minds. We already have it. We're hardwired to start from a place of scarcity, meaning there's never enough. I don't know if I'm going to survive. I have to figure things out. And that can make us respond in ways that we don't necessarily want to, or ways that we're not used to responding because we're in this fight or flight mode. But it also can really fuel our already existing limiting beliefs. And that becomes a spiral. It's what I call being effed. So that stands for exhausted, frustrated, fearful, and defeated. And when we're in that space, it becomes like wearing a set of glasses. So limiting beliefs are the narratives that are going on in our head that hold us back and keep us limited. But when we're effed, it becomes the glasses that we see the world through. Everything that we
Mm,
see is another example of how, see, I won't get another job, or I don't have something to offer. I know a lot of women, when you combine massive layoffs for especially disenfranchised groups, minority groups. And then you combine that with an older population of women who have so much experience and leadership to offer and all these amazing resumes. It really feeds in what I've been hearing a lot about from folks is ageism. Not only is the job market tough, but now I've aged out of being of value in the workforce is the message that a lot of women are giving to themselves in these
mm.
spaces. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for what I think women do really well, more so than men. No offense to the men in the audience, but is community, is really leveraging networks and the communities that they have and trying to stay connected. Because when we're effed, our desire, whether we know it's good for us or not, which it usually isn't, is to isolate. And we tend to start getting in our heads and listening to some of those limiting beliefs more and more. And it causes us to retreat. We stop doing the things to take care of our bodies and our minds. And we isolate out of embarrassment or fear or exhaustion. And that can really take a toll. And for some of us, we double down on some of those other hats. I think the most interesting research about women in general is how many roles we have to play in our lives.
Yeah.
Whereas men can just work and come home. Women are caretakers of all different kinds. We're schedulers, the emotional toll that it takes to run a household and to live a life. It's a burden. And so when we isolate, then what happens is things start falling apart around us as well. And then it's just reinforcing all those limiting beliefs. See, I can't do this and this isn't working. And so part of what I would recommend, as simple as maybe it's too simple sounding, is really trying to force yourself to stay connected. Part of being a resilient optimist is actively seeking out different perspectives. And part of that is connection. It's really talking to as many people as possible about what other options are there? How can I share what I'm looking for and what I need and what's going on? It sounds like a whole other job of work, but it can really be helpful to put yourself out there and to let people know what you need and want and get perspectives about it. Oh, because you never know who knows somebody who might have an opportunity or who might be able to share some insight that could be helpful. So I see it as a bit of a swirl where these things happen. We've got these amazing resumes because we've been, breaking that glass ceiling for many, many decades. And now we're out of work and it's all kind of coming together as this resounding message of, this is a limiting belief. I can't do this. We have to fight against all the things that happen naturally when we're in that state. I'm curious what you've seen work well for people.
So I am one of those people who has been perpetually job insecure. And it's by nature of it's a couple of things. I graduated during the recession of '09.
Mm.
So I think there's just and it was okay. I'm jumping ahead, but let me give context. So I graduated during the '09 recession. I'm in a field already that it was kind of like on the edge. It's like it's really something that you think long term you're gonna make six figures, let alone like millions of dollars, unless you're like a Don Lemon or like a Joy Reid. So there's that. And then I'm neurodivergent. So I think that also has played a huge factor in like managing like consistency in terms of job security.
Mhm.
Like for a number of reasons. I think we're just getting used to the idea of accommodating adults with neurodivergence rather than just doing it in the classroom, even though we were barely doing it then also. So all those three things, it's been very, very triggering for me. This whole issue of like layoffs and things like that. I mean, this whole platform that I've built right now, leading like a lady, is a result of being laid off in 2020, right? So on the one hand, what I've seen me around me do around that time, because I wasn't the only one. I had a couple of friends
Mhm.
who lost jobs then, was definitely the community part.
Mhm.
But the community part was hard because we were, what do you call it?
Quarantining.
What's the word? Quarantining.
Quarantining? Yeah.
That used to be like that was the word of the year, and I forgot it.
I'm glad you forgot it. That's
Yeah,
progress.
yeah, we were quarantining, so that was a little bit difficult. But it's so interesting that the quarantining, because it was such an obstacle, that it forced us to push even harder.
because we
Mhm.
were all like very desperate to make sure that this did not become like this does not define us moving forward. And so it felt really good in the beginning. In 2020, in a weird way, was kind of like something I wish I could go back to, because we've never experienced that level of like the world shutting down and
Mhm.
isolation. Like
Mhm.
that's definitely a wide group experiment. And so people were trying really, really hard to make sure community was fostered. I mean, we had things like, I don't know if you were familiar with Clubhouse. That was like an audio only app where people were coming in, chats from all over the world. And I was on there religiously. So there's
Mm.
a lot of people who supported this platform being built. Other projects that I was leading, they came from that, that. So in the beginning, community definitely was there. Suddenly, I think like around mid 2020, people kind of like were over it. Like
Mhm.
they kind of felt, I don't know if it was like fatigue with the quarantine, fatigue with masking, fatigue with just the whole conversation around what is this virus doing to us, that people just were like, I don't care anymore. We're back to like being the people we were before 2020, which was kind of like individualistic, kind of like, I'm just trying to get to where I need to get to. And then I felt that severe isolation again. So I had a therapist at the time mention, and this is, I guess, more centered to me, but I will say that I did see community work, like you said, as your suggestion. But for me, a therapist had told me, well, you just have to, Sean, you just have to figure out how to do it on your own now. You just have to now rely on you. And I thought that was a very interesting piece of advice for a therapist to give, because I was like, I thought that's the opposite.
Mm.
We have to really tap into other people. So in a sense, I've had to figure out how to navigate for the most part on my own, and kind of like adapt skills. Like I did a lot of different workshops that like just kept me engaged mentally, so that even though it was a small win kind of thing, like measuring small wins of, well, I did this workshop and I learned a new skill, and so I'm getting better at either doing something I've always done or learning something new that could be of value to me. I do land this next job, or once I do, formally incorporate this not-for-profit platform. And I think that has been very helpful for a lot of women like myself, like being engaged, saying like, okay,
Mhm.
even if I'm not hearing back from a employer or hearing back from a recruiter, at least I'm gaining this new skill and I'm feeling good about myself. I see that I am capable, that it's not something intrinsically wrong with me. Like I'm
Mhm.
actually still a talented person. And then also the third thing I'll say helped was knowing that I'm not an anomaly. I think actually that was the biggest thing, to know that, and that was what I was getting. That was the point that I was going to make when I was talking about the recession of 2009. A lot of conversations were coming up during 2020. I remember there was a big news report on ABC where they were saying, okay, it's like I think it was the decade long anniversary. I think it was the 10-year anniversary of the recession that year. So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, we're going into something that's very similar, but then we're also looking back 10 years of when this happened last time. And there were so many people that they were interviewing that were saying that, yeah, for the past 10 years, I've been struggling. Like I would have to explain the gaps in my resume, and employers act as if they didn't watch the same news that we were watching when we graduated. Like, oh. And so I was like, okay, good. I feel seen. I feel like I thought that I was a failure. I thought that
Mm.
my other peers who graduated at the same time as, yes, we were all going through the same fear, they kind of figured that I didn't. But seeing that let me know that no, we're all literally have been going through this for the past 10 years. And so I stopped blaming myself. Like that internal voice was a little bit more muted in terms of like
Mhm.
thinking that, oh, this is all my fault. But yeah, it's interesting to me that uh you say community, because again, like that, what that therapist told me, that you have to figure out on your own. You can't just always rely on people. But then also thinking about how committed we were at one point to community, and then somehow that we went back to our default set. And I think that's a very American thing. I think it's a very US thing to
Mm.
have individualistic kind of mindset,
Yeah.
sadly. And I don't know how we stop that. If you want to take it from there, like how do we tackle that? Like people going back to their default and saying, "Well, I'm also going through something, so I know that you need help, but I'm also dealing with my own issues."
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I see so much of the experiences that I've had and heard about in your story. And I think what you're talking
Yeah,
about is resilient optimism. So this idea that like you leveraged community, but you at the same time had to figure out like, where do I have agency? Where can I make some
yeah,
moves? And that piece about learning and growing and keeping your brain fresh and like learning new skills, all of that fits into that finding different perspectives piece. It's not always talking to folks. Sometimes it's learning new things or reading a book or pushing yourself to think in a different way, actively seeking out someone or a podcast that has a different opinion that you've never considered. Just really keeping your brain active in these things can help you feel like you're not going to get stuck in whatever's going on in your head. And I think you're right. The culture piece seems very clear here in the US. My parents are both first generation immigrants. English is not their first language, and I've gotten to see a couple different cultures as a result of that. And it's very different in other places of the world. So we are kind of this unique space. And I think we're still trying to figure it out. I'm not sure that the way that we do things here is really good for us as humans. Um,
yeah.
and so, but I do want to point out something because we started talking a little bit about imposter syndrome. And I don't know
Hmm.
if that's been a thing for you, but what you're describing, how, you had to stop internalizing. This isn't necessarily me alone and there's something wrong with me, but like this is a common experience, which I think is part of the power of community actually ties into imposter syndrome and how we define it. So people who experience imposter syndrome tend to externalize success. So when you have a win, it's like, well, I got lucky, or it was just
Yeah.
a great mistake, or I overworked and, so of course it worked out because I put in way more hours than I could ever sustain. Or maybe it's like, it only worked because I know someone. And so it's not about me being successful. It's like all this outside stuff. And we tend to internalize failure. So when we get it wrong, when something happens, it's like, oh, I'm a failure. That's why it went wrong. And I think that is in part some of the cultural challenge that we have here in the US is that we tend to externalize a lot of stuff and not really think about how our effort and energy and our focus and intention matters. Where you put your focus matters. And when we're really
Yeah.
spread thin, or we're all over the place, or we're really hyper focused on all the things that are going wrong or not working, that's where our energy goes and that stuff grows. And so I think part of this challenge as well is getting really clear. What do I want to strengthen? What do I want more of? What do I want to build? And trying to be intentional about putting our focus there. Otherwise, we get kind of stuck in the swirl of my life is out of control and I don't have any way of impacting it because it's all coming at me from the outside. And as we focus there, that tends to grow. Again, it becomes part of the lens that we see the world through. And then all we see is everything that's wrong and everything that's falling apart. And I know it sounds really simplistic, but our minds are powerful. What we think about, the narrative that's going on in our heads, it really drives how we show up in the world, how we engage with people, and what opportunities we go after. If we're feeling insecure and less than and alone and like we're a failure, we're not going to put ourselves out there in a way that asks for what we need, that goes after the things
Hmm.
that would make our lives better. We're going to hold ourselves back and stay small. And so really trying to think through what's going on in my head. Is it helpful? Is it hurtful? And for many of us, it's not helpful. And so then we have to do the work to make it different, to change it.
still around the issue of feeling insecure, but it's more like a personal level in terms of having conversations with family, loved ones around the holidays,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you are dealing with a layoff. So I'm wondering two things because there are a lot of conversations coming up lately. I don't know if you were familiar, if you've heard the conversation around no contact. That's
Mm-mm.
gaining traction right now. That's gaining traction right now because of a recent Oprah uh, podcast episode where she had a panel of clinicians and family members who have no contact with other family members. So, no contact meaning that the family member is removing themselves from any kind of communication or interaction with family members that they deem to be toxic. So whether it be that they have an abusive parent, physical or psychological, if they have family members that do not make them feel welcomed, they feel like they're the black sheep, etc., they are not communicating them with them in any form or fashion. So no phone calls, no emails, nothing. We're not seeing each other physically. So it's almost as if like they don't exist. So there's that conversation, and and I'm curious to know, how do you handle that when you're also dealing with the isolation of layoffs, and then where do you seek your community and help from? And then on the other hand, the people who are still in contact with their family, still feeling a burden because of not being able to participate in gift giving during the holiday season, not being able to maybe travel and be in proximity with family and loved ones because they live in a place that it would cost them too much financially to be there with them for whatever reason. Um, you can take either that you feel most comfortable with, but I was curious to know, like, what's your advice for that scenario?
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to the podcast for part 2 of this episode. If you enjoyed the advice that was given in this episode, don't forget to also like and also leave a comment below telling us what were your biggest takeaways from the conversation thus far. And of course, please make sure you share it with anyone else who you think could benefit from this hopefully life-changing advice.